Hey guys, welcome back to Penetration Testing, a hands-on introduction to hacking. We're going to be continuing chapter 1 in this video, and we're going to be downloading and installing our Android emulators, the SDK manager, which is now Android Studio if I'm correct. So I won't be doing it in Kali. I'm actually going to install it on the host machine. That way you get a little bit better performance. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize our virtual machine. And we're now on the host computer. So from here we're going to search developer.android.com/SDK/index.html. So develop.android.com, and as you can see right here, SDK index.html. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and we're going to go to developer Android Studio.index right here. I guess I could have just typed that into the address bar. And you'll come to their site. So, I don't think this loaded right. Let me refresh the page. There we go. So, we use cookies. Alright, so we'll click Download Android Studio for Windows. We can click I have read and agreed. Not that anybody reads any of these things anyways, but you have to agree to it. So we're going to click Save File. I'm going to make it easy, and I'm going to just save it to my desktop. Click Save. Now it is 1.9 gigs, so it may take a little bit of time. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to pause this video, and I'll be back when it's done. Alright, our download's completed. It didn't take too long. Roughly about maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes. We can close our browser. You'll see our Android Studio bundle. We can go ahead and double click that. It may take a second for it to load up. Here it goes. So it's going to verify the installer and get the installation process underway. And we'll click Next. We want the Android SDK, we want the virtual device, so everything is set up perfect. We can go ahead, and it's going to require 1.5 gigs, so hopefully you have the room on your computer. We'll click Next again. I agree. Next. And install. It's pretty much next, next, next. That's the nice thing about installing things on Windows compared to Linux. I have installed the older version through the book on Linux, which I guess is no longer because of the studio version. It was a little time consuming to set up, but it's the one and only time that I've ever done it. But I've read some recommendations of the author, and it even said to install it on your host computer for performance issues. Some of the virtualization stuff that I tried to do through the Android Studio on Kali Linux, my CPU said it couldn't virtualize hardware through the virtual machine. So I shouldn't have an issue with that on the host computer. It's another reason why I'm running it on the host and not through Kali Linux. So this is almost extracted. It's going to go ahead and install, and I'll be back when it's done. Alright, now that that's done installing, we can go ahead and click Next and click Finish, and it should start Android Studio. Alright, so from here, you don't want to import any settings because we haven't had it installed before. So I'm going to keep it on the setting that it's on. I do not have a previous version, so let's click OK. Alright, now that that's loaded up, it says welcome back. The setup wizard will validate your current Android SDK and development environment setup. You'll have an option to download the new Android SDK or use an existing installation. So once the setup wizard completes, you can import an existing Android app into your Android Studio, or you can start a new one. So we'll go ahead and we'll click Next. We're going to go with the custom installation, next. We'll click next again. And we're going to want the Android virtual device. We're going to take the Android API and the SDK platform. Just in case we need it, we'll click. It's not that big, it's 113 megs. We'll click next again, and we'll click finish. So this is going to go ahead and download and install the components, and will likely take several minutes again, so I'll be back once it's finished. Alright, so our components are finished downloading and installing. We'll click finish. And now we're going to configure Android Studio. In the book, it wants you to download and install Android 4.3, 2.2, and 2.1. So we can do that in the SDK Manager. We'll go ahead and click Configure, SDK Manager. And here's our Android SDK and our versions. So what's installed, what's partially installed, updates available. So we're going to find 4.3 Jelly Bean, 2.2 Froyo, and 2.1 Eclair. We're going to click Apply, and we're going to click OK. And it should go ahead and ask us to accept the terms and conditions. We'll click Next. And again, it's going to install those components and download them as well there first. So I'll be back in a bit again. Alright, now that that's finished, we can click Finish. We can click OK. We can also check and see if we have the most up-to-date version. Oh, see, there's an update, so we can click Update Now. Download size is 1.3 gigs. So again, it may take a little while to do its thing, so just be patient. Alright, now that that's complete, we can click Finish. And I'm just going to check. So one thing I noticed in the chapter is that they use the Google APIs. So I'm actually going to go back to the SDK Manager where we install the 2.2, 2.1, and 4.3. And I'm going to click Show Package Details. And I know that it says the Google APIs are obsolete, but just in case we actually do need them for the book, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go find them, and I'm going to click them for each one. The 4.3, I'm going to install the Google APIs for that, and as you saw down here, I clicked them for the 2.2 and 2.1. I'm going to click Apply, click OK, and it should download and install these as well. So that shouldn't take too long. They should be pretty small. There's one. And I guess it all depends on the speed of your internet as well. So after this is complete, we can go ahead and we can create the 3 Android emulators based on 4.3, 2.2, and 2.1. And we'll go ahead and do that. Alright, finished. So we can click OK. From here we can start a new Android Studio project. We'll just name it Pentest. And I don't know, I don't think we're going to need the C++, but I'm going to include it. I'm going to click Next. And I'm going to say, so the minimum SDK I'm going to say is probably 4.3. I don't see anything less, well, that we're using. So I'll say OK. I'll click Next. Next again. Add an activity to mobile. I'm pretty new to the Android Studio, so I don't know really what the activity is. I'm just going to leave it empty. Click Next. Main activity, activity name, Next. We'll just click finish, and from there, if I'm correct, it should open up, and we should be able to add in and manage AVDs, which is the Android virtual device there. So give it a second to build the project. Alright, Android Studio has loaded up here. I'm going to click not to show these tips on startup and close. So now we're going to go ahead and create our Android emulations. So we'll click Tools, Android, AVD Manager, and create a virtual device. So a CVD. We're going to click, if we're following the book, we're going to create it as a Nexus 4, or a Nexus 4, sorry. And we'll click Next. Alright, so in the book it says Google's API version 18. So for, Google API version for Android 4.3, Google API's version 18. So we're going to have to come over here to x86 images. And as you can see here, it says API levels. We can go down to 18. We'll download the Google one. We'll click download. We'll let it do its thing. For 2.2, we want Google's API version 8. And for 2.1, we want the API's version 7. So from there, I'll do those with you anyways. Let this install. Doing these the SDK thing for the phones I found was a lengthy process at the beginning. Everything else seems to be a lot shorter, a lot sweeter, easier to do. So once you get through this, it's less of a headache. Alright, we'll click finish. So we should be able to click next, and then AVD name. So this is where we're just going to name this Android 4.3. We're going to keep it as portrait. Next is 4, Jelly Bean, device frame, show advanced settings. Let's see what's in here. Camera front, network speed, graphics. Yeah, it's all good. We can keep that the same. We can click finish. And nothing happens. Oh, there we go. Alright, so we have our first one here. I don't know exactly what this one is. Maybe I can remove it. Alright, so now we're going to create our second device, which is going to be the Android 2.2. We're going to click Nexus 4 again. We're going to click Next. And you'll find that it's going to be asking for Google's API's version 8, which is not in the recommended. It's not in the x86 images. It's in other, where we can scroll down. And so you can see here, we got the first one, 2.2 Google API, and it's deprecated, which means it's not being in use anymore. It's old. So you may find the odd person that buys an old phone or whatever that may be using it, but for that most part it's non-existent anymore. So we'll click next, and we're going to name this Android 2.2. Portrait, advanced again. We'll click finish. We'll do that again real quick for the 2.1. We'll click Nexus 4 again, next, other images, and this time we're looking for the API version 7. So we're going to go down here, 7, Google API. We're going to click next, and we'll rename this Android 2.1. Other than that, I think these are all set up. Haxum or whatever the hell this is not installed. I don't know if I'll need to install that. Consider using an x86 image host for better performance. So if we have to install that, I'll go through that later. Yet again, front camera, we don't need it, anything like that. We can just we can click finish, and we have our 3 phones set up and ready to go. We can go ahead and see if we can start one of these phones up. Okay, so it says we're going to need to install it. We'll click OK. Click next. Yes. We'll let it install that program. And we're done. We'll click finish and see if we can now start the emulator. Now I know from past experience sometimes it takes a while to boot up the emulator at first go, so we'll give it a few minutes here and let it start up. As you can see here, the phone's booting up just as slow as the old Androids, and there you go. So this should look, feel, and act as if you had the phone in your hand. Just everything by the mouse. So we should be able to open up text. Should be able to click back, browse the web, connect to it. So that's our 4.3. The same thing with 2.2 and 2.1. They should all work. So go ahead, power those up, make sure they all work on your end, and we can close this down. We'll be heading back to the Kali Linux side of things. So another thing I had to do to run the 2.2 and the 2.1 phone was close out of here, click Tools, Android, SDK Manager. I had to go over to the second tab, SDK Tools, and I clicked CMake LLDB, and I also installed NDK down here. So click those, click apply. It's going to download, it will install them, and that should be good. From there, then you shouldn't have any problems opening up your machines. So Tools, Android, AVD Manager, and that's going to show you where your phones are. So I'm actually having currently right now is my graphic cards, because I have 2 graphic cards in my laptop. My NVIDIA and the HD 4000 something has driver issues with running the emulator, so I'm having a little bit of an issue with that myself. But if you don't have an issue like I am, now your other emulators should open up just fine. So real quick, I'll touch base on I've been doing a little bit of reading about the GPU issue I have. Supposedly it's like any Intel graphics card. I don't know why it's doing it with the NVIDIA, but the way I fixed it was you go to Tools, Android, SDK Manager, and under Appearance and Behaviors we go to Updates, and Update, automatically check for updates. I went from stable channel to beta, and then I said check now. It did the big download, took forever to unzip. I clicked finish when it was done. I closed everything, I reopened it, and I was able to run my emulators for the phone. The other 2 emulators I'm having issues with, but I'm going to touch base with those when we go through chapter 20, because I'm just done with fighting with this for now. So with my own issues, if you have issues, I'll touch base with them in Chapter 12 when we go over doing some of the phone testing. So I switched over to follow the book and install Smartphone Pentest Framework and Kali. And what I found is when I tried to issue the git clone command, I downloaded a file and it says the Smartphone Pentest Framework has been deprecated by yada yada yada. And if you're following my book, download the Kali image. So if we use that image, it would, all the networking we've done, all the programs that we've put on Kali so far, it would be pointless. So what we'll do is when it comes time to doing the pen test through the phone part in Chapter 20, we'll download the image then, and we'll just use that image for that chapter of the book. Until then, I guess we're done setting up the our Android emulator, and we'll deal with the Smartphone Pentest Framework later on in Chapter 20. So that's it for this video. It's been quite a rough ride with everything being a little different than the book and going through everything for the first time. But we'll get through it. If there's any more problems, we'll deal with that in Chapter 20. Alright, if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video where we install our target virtual machines, Windows 7 and Windows XP.